Do you believe in UFOs, astral projections, mental telepathy, ESP, clairvoyance, spirit photography, telekinetic movement, full trance mediums, the Loch Ness Monster, and the theory of Atlantis?
If there's a steady paycheck in it, I'll believe anything you say.
Halloween is fast approaching. I've already started celebrating.
So have I.
Yeah. When did you start your Halloween celebration this year, Mr. Mash?
When was the first day of summer? Yeah, that's not true. I usually like to start watching horror movies. I really get into the festive mood around August. This year it did hit me August 1st.
You were up here. It was the last week in August, and you were ready to go on Halloween.
Oh, yeah. Usually about mid-August, I'm like full Halloween mode, ready to go.
I officially start my celebration of Halloween on the 18th of September when I start my 6-week-long Halloween Horror Fest blogathon, which is currently ongoing at my blog, www.zacksfilmthoughts.blogspot.com. However, I get in the Halloween spirit even before then. The middle of July, when it first hits me, and I want it to start being Halloween. As we get into August, oh man, it just needs to happen now.
Yeah.
What's something that people really associate with the Halloween season, Mr. Mash?
Ghosts.
Ghost stories, even. Telling spooky ghost stories. I remember in middle school, either our literature class or our local history class would devote a day or so to local ghost stories. I was never horribly interested in that, truthfully. We're in a part of the U.S. that's very deep into the whole Civil War thing. The ghost stories were always Civil War related, and I've never had any interest in the antebellum Civil War era. But it was kind of nice for them to bring that spookiness into the classroom.
Yeah.
So let's just get down to brass tacks, man. Do you believe in ghosts?
Yes.
Have you ever experienced an anomalous encounter?
Yes. As a matter of fact, just the other night.
Oh, yeah. You've moved into a haunted room. Have you been acquainted with the ghosts?
I was in the laundry room by myself, had the door shut. My dad's computer, Dad has it set up so that you have to push a button on the keyboard to wake the computer up. Standing there folding clothes, nowhere near the computer desk. Computer booted up all on its own.
You're attributing this to supernatural entities.
Yeah, why wouldn't you?
When something like that happens, my first thought isn't a ghost did it. I guess we should explain the divide that you and I have on this. You definitely believe in ghosts, and I guess I would call myself a skeptic.
Bigfoot totally exists, but a ghost, no, that's impossible.
The thing with Bigfoot, I really want to believe. I can't acknowledge that there's zero scientific evidence to support the actual existence of Sasquatch or Mothman or the Chupacabra or whatever, but in my heart, they're real, JD. They live in my heart, like the Force.
Okay. There are some things that cannot be explained.
Like what?
Well, I just gave you one. There was no one near the computer, no animals in the room with me.
Computers can turn on and off for all sorts of reasons. Something that's sort of similar to this that happened to me once. In my home by myself, my dog started barking at something in one of the back rooms. Okay, that's a little weird. And I went in there, and I looked around into the room that just happened to be my office, where my computer is. She was barking at something in there. Okay, this is weird. The tray on my computer at the time opened up all by itself. And I thought, that's weird. Looked at it, and I realized that I'd not turned my computer off, turned off my monitor. Antivirus software I had at the time, I'm not using it anymore. But it would do this thing where it would say, you need to insert the disk for an update or something. It would cause the disk tray to open like that. And I'll be totally honest, it spooked me a little bit. In the calm of a regular evening, we can say ghosts aren't real, but we're alone in a big house by ourselves and something weird happens. Immediately, we are open to the possibility that ghosts or demons are involved. There isn't a demon in my computer.
So explain the rocking chair rocking by itself.
I never saw that personally. When I was a child, a rocking chair that used to belong to my grandfather, who passed before I was born, reportedly my mom or my dad would see that moving on its own. Now, I never personally saw it. People want to believe in all sorts of things. People like to believe in ghosts because it confirms that there's life after death.
I have seen so much stuff in my lifetime that it's hard for me to believe that ghosts do not exist. But I'm also open to the possibility of ghosts existing, whereas you're just a douchebag that has your mind shut down.
I wouldn't say that I am closed-minded. Give me some evidence that can't be corroborated by something else. Thus far, the universe has yet to provide provide me with such evidence. We're kind of rambling off topic here. The premise of tonight's episode, we'll be discussing famous ghost stories, alleged hauntings. Some of these cases are more open and closed than others. Some of them, I don't know if they're real or not, but they're good stories. At least one of the topics we have listed tonight is completely fictional ghost story, but you wanted to talk about it, so it's on the list. Actually, all of these are American hauntings. It's hard to get a perspective on famous alleged hauntings outside of your own culture. If you just had to throw something out there, what would you say is probably the most famous haunting in American history?
The Amityville Horror.
28 days after the Lutz family moved into their dream house, they were running for their lives. What happened to them is an experience in terror you will never forget, and you will believe in the Amityville Horror.
What is your general opinion on the Amityville Horror phenomenon? It really is a phenomenon.
Here's what I have to say about it. I do feel the house is legitimately haunted. However, I do think it's been blown seriously out of proportion.
I didn't even really realize how big of a phenomenon the whole Amityville Horror thing really is. Do you know how many movies have been inspired or based on the Amityville incident?
There's the 20 Amityville movies themselves.
15 movies, with 2 currently awaiting release. The newest one, Amityville The Awakening, it's got Bella Thorne in it, and it's directed by Frank Calfone, who did the remake of Maniac, which was really good, but everything I've seen of this movie looks like trash. Another example of a very talented European horror director being chewed up and spit out by the studio, I think. There have also been at least 2 documentaries. There was a really interesting documentary called My Amityville Horror, which was about the son, the Lutz family, the youngest boy. He never actually came out and said that he believed the thing was haunted. The film was more about the effect the whole phenomenon has had on him, and it certainly seemed to leave the viewer with the impression that his stepdad, George Lutz, was emotionally manipulative and abusive to his family, if nothing else. The thing I didn't know is there have been 10 books written about the Amityville Horror, and at least a few of the completely fictitious film sequels were based off of books that were completely fictitious. The original book, which I actually just saw in a bookstore the other day, this was presented as a true story, and then they wrote a bunch of books that were completely fictitious. Then those books were turned into movies, which were even more fallacious. You know any of the things that we can definitely confirm as true in the case of the Amityville Horror?
The Lutzes lived in the Amityville house.
That, and there was a murder in the house. Ronald DeFeo Jr. shot and killed 6 members of his family at 112 Ocean Avenue. This was on November 3rd, 1974. Convicted of second-degree murder in November of the next year. Those are pretty much the only facts.
Didn't the Lutzes really leave the house in 28 days?
Yeah, murders did happen in the house. Then the Lutz family moved in, and then they moved out 28 days later. Everything else about what happened, well, is at the very least disputed, if not outright debunked.
Hey, 28 days later. That's the true sequel to the Amityville Horror.
What are some of the supernatural events that happened in the house, purportedly?
The neighbors confirmed that they'll see the little girl standing in the window. The Lutzes said that there was a pig-faced demon one time.
Jody, the little girl's imaginary friend Jody, who was a demonic pig.
Yeah, the walls drip blood.
I've never read the book. I've certainly seen the movie many times. Is most famous from the film is The Bleeding Walls.
Priest with the flies, that supposedly really happened.
What is purported to happen? A priest entered the house and heard a voice telling him to get out. That was something that supposedly happened. George Lutz would wake up every night at 3:15 in the morning, which was when Ronald DeFeo killed his family. Yeah, there were flies in the house. There was supposedly a red room in the basement, a hidden room in the basement that put off some bad juju, freaked out the dog.
And wasn't it where one of the kids were kept for punishment or some shit like that?
I don't think so. Here's one that is a good example of how facts were undoubtedly exaggerated. In the book, on the morning of January 1st, 1976, cloven footprints were seen in the snow outside of the house. Now, we know that didn't happen because it didn't snow on January 1st, 1976. So,
okay, so it didn't snow, but was there snow on the ground?
No, there was no snow on the ground. Something else that reportedly happened, doors and windows were blown off their hinges. When the next family moved into the house, all of the original hardware were in all the doors and windows. In the book, the police are called to the house on several occasions. The police were never called. The red room in the basement was actually just a closet, and it wasn't hidden, it wasn't a secret room. Another thing that they like to claim about the Amityville house is that it was built on the burial grounds of the Sumac Indian tribe. Definitely is not. Pretty well documented that the Amityville Horror is a hoax. It's generally agreed that Ronald DeFeo's attorney and this author they hired came up with this. How involved the Lutzes were with the hoax is debated. I know there was a lawsuit where they sued someone involved with the property, with either the production of the book or the films. They sued them for money that they felt they were owed, which seems to me to suggest a mercenary aspect. It's a good story. That's the reason it survives. That's the reason they're still making fucking movies about this.
I know that town has said that they can see a little girl standing in the...
It's interesting the relationship the town has with this phenomenon. If you go on YouTube, you can find videos of people walking up to the house or walking by the house with a camera or their cell phone out. And at least one I watched, somebody drove by while this person was recording and they yelled from their car window, "Get a fucking light!" I get the impression that maybe the people in that community are not too appreciative of the legend, if you can even call it a legend.
Well, I saw a documentary one time that was talking about how much the Lutz is made up. There was a neighbor that was a friend of the family that he used to see a little girl in the window or something.
Who knows?
I mean, there's such thing as mass hysteria.
Yeah, and there's that very famous photograph taken from the Amityville house of the demonic little boy, or what they say is a demonic little boy.
Yeah.
This is, I would say, the most famous haunting in America, and it is mostly demonstratively about 99% bullshit. But it's a good story. Segue to talk a little bit about that series of films. Are any of those movies actually good?
The first one's pretty good. The first one's a horror classic.
I guess it's a classic. I don't know.
The Possession. Was that the second one?
Yes, Amityville 2, The Possession, yeah. That is the prequel.
That one scared me a little bit.
We talked about that, yeah. The one scene where the family is coming out of their graves or something.
Ugh,
and
creepy.
A lot of hardcore horror fans seem to prefer Amityville 2 to the first one. I've seen the first four, and I saw the remake, which I didn't care for. I don't really have a very high opinion of any of those movies.
The remake tried to outlutz the Lutzes.
The remake was, in my brain, very much a typical example of the studio horror remake. What I mostly remember about the remake, them trying too hard. Broad thing with Jack Ketchum, this cowboy who killed these Indians or something, and then they had to have the spooky little girl who was played by Chloe Moretz. Kind of made a career of playing spooky little girls. One of these days, for Halloween or something, I should sit down and watch the entire Amityville series, because that's the kind of stupid shit I would do.
What are you guys?
Well, we've been called ghost hunters, paranormal researchers.
But we prefer to be known simply as Ed and Lorraine Warren.
You picking up anything in here, hon?
Something awful happened here, Ed. You have a lot of spirits in here, but there's one that I'm most worried about because it is so hateful.
Figure that emerged from the Amityville case is a pair of people who say that they are demonologists, which I think is a funny term to apply to oneself, and they're infamous, and that is Ed and Lorraine Warren, otherwise known as the Warrens. They're especially famous now, since The Conjuring came out. They made a movie about them.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the Warrens and their whole crusade against the supernatural?
I know that they really do have a basement full of...
Supposedly haunted items?
Yeah, that is true. It is true. Well, true. That Lorraine feels that she got a premonition of her daughter dying and rushed to her rescue.
This is straight from Wikipedia. So these are the facts, ma'am. Ed was a self-taught demonologist, author, and lecturer. Lorraine is a professed clairvoyant and medium. In 1952, the Warrens founded the New England Society for Psychic Research, the oldest ghost hunting group in New England. They claim to have investigated over 10,000 cases during their career. Flat out give my opinion on the Warrens. I think Ed Warren was a con artist, and I think Lorraine Warren is insane. Aside from the Amityville case. And they claimed, both of them, Lorraine claimed that the Amityville house was haunted and continues to claim that it was haunted, even though, as we previously stated, the whole case has been pretty widely denounced as a hoax. She sticks to her guns on that. And if you've seen any interviews with her, she's strange. She's an unusual person.
I mean, I've seen her do some stuff on television and things like that.
Because
so.
they never creatively edit anything for TV.
It was live, bitch.
It was live, bitch! Here are some of their famous cases, aside from Amityville. Demon murder cases. Ooh. In 1989, Arn Johnson was accused of killing his landlord. Ed and Lorraine had been called prior to the killing to deal with the alleged demonic possession of the younger brother of Johnson's fiancée. Warrens subsequently claimed that Johnson was also possessed. The killer tried to get a plea of non-guilty via demonic possession, but the courts did not buy that. The brother of the guy who was killed ended up suing the Warrens on the grounds that his brother was mentally ill, not possessed. According to this person, this is secondhand, so who knows, that the Warrens promised his family that they'd become millionaires if they would just insist that their boys had been plagued by demons. And this is not the first time Ed said something. At one point, the Warrens were collaborating with a horror author. Author was given some notes. Why are you giving me fictional notes on an event that actually happened? And Ed was quoted as saying, "All the people who come to us are crazy. Just use what you can and make the rest up. Make it up and make it scary. That's why we hired you."
Were there witnesses?
I don't know. Have you seen pictures of the real Annabelle doll? They put the Annabelle doll in the movie and made a crappy movie about the doll by itself. And in the movie, the doll is this really creepy porcelain doll. You know what the doll looks like in real life?
A regular doll?
It's a Raggedy Ann doll. But that is is a real item, does reside in their supernatural museum in their basement or whatever.
If you ever watch her work, you see how spot on she can be with some stuff. Pretty convincing. You don't want to believe that psychic abilities can exist, and I want to believe that they exist.
It's not a matter of not wanting to believe, it's a matter of not believing, but okay.
You will not even be open to the thought of psychic abilities.
I will when there is compelling evidence.
There's all kinds of scientists working on trying to...
There's this one guy, I remember hearing an interview with him on Coast to Coast AM. He was getting funding from the state to work on psychic research. He said, you'll think about somebody calling you and then they'll call you? We're doing a whole bunch of research into that, which seems, well, like a rather thin foundation to build a research project upon.
Well, he was a nut job. There are people who are actually trying to develop machinery that enhances the thought waves of the brain.
What is more interesting to me is not going outside of known research, but the people who are working within known research to talk about how our brain perceives things. Somebody was doing experiments with the brain and how the brain perceives things. There's a certain part of the brain that deals with monitoring the difference between you and other people, observing the self and observing outside of the self. Like all things with the brain, occasionally there is confusion and misfire. And there's a certain way you can trigger misdirection between those two properties of the mind. Some people now believe that this is how the concept of thinking ghosts exist, or feeling a presence in a room when there isn't one, can happen. Momentary misfire of the part of the brain that processes the self and outside of the self, which is some pretty heady stuff. And that's more interesting to me than saying, oh, if you concentrate real hard, you can move something with your mind or whatever.
I like the idea, and not so much because, maybe one day I can move something with my mind.
I know that's your in-game.
But aside from that, the reason I've always been so interested in the idea of psychic abilities is we still don't know what the brain is capable of.
That is very true. There are still many things we do not know about the brain. The brain is a very mysterious organ indeed.
Maybe humans do possess the ability to psychically perceive something. I feel like there's more scientific proof to suggest that we may possibly have that ability, as opposed to, oh no, we definitely don't have that ability.
There's a lot of maze in that sentence.
Is this sprawling 160-room mansion in San Jose, California, known as the Winchester Mystery House, said to be inhabited by ghosts and inspired by madness. It has the deranged design of a carnival funhouse. Secret passages and bizarre dead ends are everywhere, but someone actually lived here, and many maintain that something still does.
Let's talk about a very famous haunted house. One that I guess probably slipped more into legend than fact at this point. At the center of this particular legend, there is a genuinely fascinating building, what is generally called the Winchester Mystery House. Now, are you familiar with the Winchester Mystery House?
Isn't this the one that The Haunting was based off of?
I don't think so.
Isn't this the one the lady wanted a bunch of children, built this great big house, as she was building it, people died?
I think you're a little confused. The fact in the case of the Winchester House, this is a mansion in San Jose, California, which was once the personal residence of Sarah Winchester, the widow of gun magnate William Winchester. Now, I'm sure you've heard of Winchester rifles.
Yeah.
Obviously, this was the guy who owned the company. Sarah, reportedly, this is the legend, was told by a psychic that the ghost of all the people who were murdered by her husband's guns were going to haunt her. She had to build this house, continuously built, in order to fend off...
Yeah, okay, that's what it is.
They had to keep building the house in order to keep the ghost from attacking her. Not a lot of evidence behind why the house was still being built, but it is indeed a very strange building. Ever since construction commenced in 1854, it from the ground up construction proceeded around the clock, by some accounts, without interruption, until Sarah's death on September 5th, 1922. However, that is questioned. Some people say that construction stopping for weeks on end. There are roughly 160 rooms, including 40 bedrooms, 2 ballrooms, 1 completed and 1 unfinished, 47 fireplaces, over 10,000 panes of glass, 17 chimneys, 2 basements, and 3 elevators. There's a room in the house that has 3 exits, but only 1 entrance. 1 door leads to a sink, while another door opens up to a 10-foot drop into the kitchen. There are many doors high enough to only accommodate Sarah, who was 4'10". There's a tiny, superfluous balcony that's inaccessible. 1 room has a window built into the floor. There are closets and doors and windows that open into blank walls. Very famously, there is a staircase that runs up into the ceiling. The facts in the scenario: there are no primary documents attesting to the stories of the legend, the ghost. Sarah Winchester was a hermit. She didn't leave behind any diaries or letters revealing her beliefs. We don't actually know why she was building this weird house, but it is certainly a fascinating place. I mean, you have any opinions or thoughts on that?
No.
If we're ever in California, are we going to have to go find this place?
Maybe, that'd be cool.
They have tours, and notably they are historical tours, not ghost tours. From the brief Google search I did, nobody has ever actually reported any ghostly activity in the house. But it's a really good story, isn't it?
Robert Eugene Otto had a doll who stayed with him his whole life. It was the perfect likeness of the young boy and was even named Robert after him. As a young boy, Eugene developed a strange fascination with Robert. He spent long hours alone with his doll talking to it, and when anything went wrong at home, Eugene always knew who to blame. Robert did it. Robert did it.
Speaking of things that are really good stories that may have no basis in reality in the least, are you familiar with Robert the Doll?
Yes, I am familiar with Robert the Doll.
Yeah, do you know him personally?
No, but it was a gift that was given to this boy. The boy kept saying the doll made him do bad things.
Mm-hmm.
And the dad decided to lock the doll, locked them in a trunk up in the attic. Later, when the boy was an adult, he goes up in the attic to sort through the father's things, finds Robert the doll, and then bad things start to happen again.
Yes, the strange incidences resume after a absence of decades.
However, the doll actually still exists.
Yeah.
It is in a museum, and I can't remember the name of the museum.
It's in Key West, Florida. Robert the Doll is real, and you can find pictures of it easily.
And it is a creepy-looking doll.
It is a fucking spooky-ass doll. One actually does creep me out a little bit. I don't know if the hauntings or the tales of possession or anything are true, but you can look at that doll and say that is a spooky-ass doll. What you said basically is true. Owner of Robert was Robert Eugene Otto, famous painter and author. The things that reportedly happened when Robert the doll was around, people would hear voices when no one was around, or they would hear the son conversing with people when there was nobody else in the room. It is said that misfortune befell the family. Something bad would happen, and the boy would say that Robert did it. That's the legend. This is another one where it happened long enough ago that the line between fact and legend is blurred. Very least, that is one fucking spooky looking doll. They made a movie called Robert the Doll recently. I haven't seen it. Reportedly, Child's Play was inspired by Robert the Doll.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, here it is. The museum is the East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida, where Robert resides to this day in his little white sailor suit, continuing to sit there and creep people out.
This is the story of a man called Ichabod Crane, and what happened to him one dark, dark night long ago in a place called Sleepy Hollow.
The next topic on our list here is definitely a fictional story. Never claimed to be true. You insisted that this be included, and I gotta ask, when we decided we were going to do an episode about true hauntings, what was your motivation for including The Legend of Sleepy Hollow?
I never said true hauntings. You were the one that turned it into true hauntings. I said ghost stories. If you're going to talk about American ghost stories, whether you believe it was Brom on the horse or not, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow definitely belongs on any list of American ghost stories.
I actually agree with you. This is maybe one of the most iconic ghost stories ever. You and I have actually talked about wanting to do a whole episode centered around all the various Sleepy Hollow adaptations, because there have been a few. You know who wrote the story?
Yeah, Washington Irving.
Washington Irving, and it was published in 1820. Everybody, I think, knows the story. Ichabod Crane is a school teacher who comes to the town of Sleepy Hollow and tries to get in to the Van Tassel family, the local rich people, especially the daughter, Katrina. And there's a love triangle between Ichabod and Katrina and Brom Bones, who is a burly fellow who's courting her. In the original story, is it at a Halloween party? I'm pretty sure it is.
Can't tell you, dude. In the story, the witch thing...
I don't think so.
Story.
Admittedly, I have not read The Legend of Sleepy Hollow since probably grade school. Don't think there was anything about witches in the original story.
That's where I get confused.
You're more familiar with the Tim Burton Sleepy Hollow and the TV show.
The majority of the adaptations I've seen have had Katrina be a witch.
Yeah, I could be wrong. On the internet for free. If I really was committed to doing this episode, I probably would have just gone on the Gutenberg Project and read it. It's not long. It's like a 10-page story. But the part that everybody remembers about it is
the chasing.
The Headless Horseman. There is a long tradition of headless ghosts from all over the world. Do you know the Scottish term for a headless ghost?
Oh, shit. I know it, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. Go ahead.
A Doulahan. The Doulahan was a headless spirit. The thing about the Doulahan that I like that frequently gets left out is they would whip the horse with their own spines. Why don't we have more spine whips in pop culture? Doulahan has come back in popularity because a couple of Japanese animes and manga, shit that the internet loves, featured Doulahans, made them re-enter the pop culture consciousness. There is a real village in upstate New York called Sleepy Hollow. Sleepy Hollow is a village in the town of Mount Pleasant in Westchester County, New York. The village is located on the east bank of the Hudson River, about 30 miles outside of New York City. Really is across the river from a place called Tarrytown. The town does exist. Sleepy Hollow, New York, and Salem, Massachusetts have an ongoing rivalry about who is the real Halloween capital of the world.
I feel like we need to move to one of those towns.
I do too. The thing that's really interesting to me about Sleepy Hollow, the element of ambiguity of the ghost story. The story and many of the film adaptations set it up where However, it could go either way. Either Ichabod goes out into the woods and has an encounter with the Headless Horseman, or it's Brom dressed up, pranking him, trying to scare him out of town so he can have Trina. The text supports both interpretations. What's your opinion on it, man? What do you think?
I really want it to be the ghost.
You really want the Headless Horseman to be real?
Yeah. When he hurls the pumpkin head.
Oh, yeah. Probably the most famous image in all of horror literature. Headless Horseman holding up the flaming jack-o'-lantern.
He's a cool ghost. I want him to be...
He's like the original cool ghost.
I just want him to be a ghost.
And I totally understand that. I like having it both ways. I like the ambiguity. Even as a kid, I liked that. My grade school, I remember the teacher had us read the story, use it as a gateway to discuss ambiguity in text and critical thinking in text, which I think is probably the most important thing you can teach your kid. It's an awesome premise, probably why it's been adapted to screen so many times. And these are just some of the adaptations. The first film version of The Headless Horseman was a movie in 1922 called The Headless Horseman, a silent film. One of the most famous versions is the Disney cartoon from 1949, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, which we just watched not that long ago. There was a TV version from 1980 called The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, where Ichabod Crane was played by Jeff Goldblum. Meg Foster played Katrina Van Tassel. And it's never been released on DVD or anything, but I definitely want to see that one, just based on the cast. There's a Tim Burton movie. Go listen to our Tim Burton episode. I believe that was episode 49, if you want to hear our thoughts on that film we both enjoy a lot.
Yes.
Though it deviates considerably from the text. Do you remember this? There was a CGI cartoon called Night of the Headless Horseman. This was also in 99. This was a CGI motion capture cartoon that premiered on Fox. I remember watching it and even then thinking that computer animation had quite a bit to go. And then there's the TV show that's also on Fox that I don't watch, haven't seen. I know you watch it, you enjoy it.
Yeah, it's got the cool Monster of the Week thing going on. I like it.
It's so weird that there are so many horror TV shows out there now, and I don't have interest in any of them.
I watched the first episode of Scream Queens.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to give the second episode a watch, but I wasn't all that impressed.
Everything I've seen from this Ryan Murphy guy, I don't like.
In 1818, it began in this house. Now, nearly 200 years later, it's ready to finish what it started.
There's something evil here.
Based on the terrifying true story.
Here's another very famous American ghost haunting. I'll admit this is one that I'm not real familiar with. I don't even know if you've heard of the Bell Witch.
I've seen the movie.
Which one? The American Haunting?
Oh, I've seen that one too.
That's based on the Bell Witch as well.
Blair Witch? Wasn't she loosely based off of...
Yes, the Blair Witch was inspired by the Bell Witch. This is a Southern folklore, and it's centered around the 19th century Bell family of Adams, Tennessee. This is straight from Wikipedia. In 1870, the Bell family came under attack by a witch who was believed to be a lady called Kate Batts. It began with noises in the walls and grew to include unusual sounds, people being slapped and pinched, objects being thrown, animals being spooked without visible cause. She frequently cursed the Bell family out loud. Several accounts report that during his military career, future President Andrew Jackson was intrigued with the story and was frightened away after traveling to investigate. Other stories relate that the family was haunted by scratching noises outside their door after Bell found a half-dog, half-rabbit creature in their yard. Some stories end with Bell being poisoned by the witch and the witch verbosely claiming credit for it. This is a legend. 75 years after the events were said to happen, somebody wrote a book about it. That book was based off the diaries of the youngest son, who would have been about 3 to 6 years old when these events happened, who didn't write his diaries until he was 30. So there's very little evidence upon which the Bell Witch legend is built. However, it is kind of a cool story. I'm pro-legend. Myths and legend and folklore are the greatest thing in the world. The foundation upon which not just horror literature, but all literature is built. But I also think that we shouldn't confuse our folklore with fact lore. There have been a bunch of movies made about the Bell Witch. The Blair Witch was inspired. I guess Burkittsville and Tennessee aren't too far apart. There was a movie in 2004 called The Bell Witch Haunting. There was an American Haunting with Donald Sutherland and Sissy Spacek in 2005. I didn't see that. It looked awful.
It wasn't very well done at all.
Okay. There was a movie in 2007, Bell Witch the movie, and a movie in 2013, The Bell Witch Haunting. I think that was a found footage film.
That's what sometimes happens on the country roads around Peoria, Oklahoma. People see lights. They call them the spook lights, and the road where they are commonly seen is known hereabouts as Spook Light Road.
We're getting close to the end here, but there's just 3 more things I want to talk about. Ghost lights. Have you heard of ghost lights, JD?
It's about lights that appear and disappear.
Basically, some people call them spook lights, some people call them earth lights, some people call them phantom lights. Glowing, floating lights that are seen in usually remote areas. And there are a bunch of famous ones all over the world where people say that every night at a certain point in time you can usually find them, usually see them. The most famous ones are the Marfa lights of Marfa, Texas. Marfa, Texas, which is this tiny little town which is notable for nothing else. There are the Brown Mountain Lights in Blue Ridge Parkway in Brown Mountain, North Carolina. It's the St. Louis Lights in St. Louis, Saskatchewan. In that legend, the lights are of a derailed train. There are the Min Min Lights in Queensland, Australia, Mako Station Lights in North Carolina, Hornet Spook Light in Missouri, Anson Lights in Texas, Dover Lights in Arkansas. What are your opinions? Obviously, you're familiar with this phenomenon. Most every town has one that's at least nearby.
I feel like that can usually be explained somehow.
It's usually reflections from a freeway.
See, I don't know that I'm a hardcore believer, but I'm definitely not a hardcore skeptic. I try to look at things with an open mind, but also try to impose a little bit of logic into the situation.
Just seeing floating lights is really enough to say, obviously it's a ghost. I know Marfa lights have been proven to be reflections from the freeway, and usually it's something like that.
How do you feel about the ghost fog pictures?
Oh, spirit photography is a bunch of baloney. It's a bunch of balogna.
Why?
Ghost orbs thing is...
Well, that's bullshit. That's just dust on your lens.
Yes, exactly. It's well known. It's documented.
I'm not even talking about orbs. I'm talking about ghostly fogs and shapes.
Spooky fog. There are a lot of things that can happen when you're taking a picture. You're photographing something, especially if you're photographing with a flash. Things can reflect. Natural elements can interact with the light and make all sorts of odd things appear, seemingly, in the photo. Ghost photography, I am extremely skeptical of. I don't put much credence into it at all.
That's fair, but I am usually pretty skeptical with those myself. However, I have seen a couple of photos that I know for a fact have not been doctored. There's this one I saw that you can clearly see the outline of a girl. You can see her toes and everything. I took one myself in the alleyway by my old house.
Okay.
Took a picture of the grass there because I was goofing off. I was like, let me see if I can find a ghost. It was a new camera. I was playing with it. A little white cloud coming up out of the ground.
Yeah, I think you've told me about this.
I went over there to investigate. I couldn't find anything. There was nothing there that could have made that happen.
Like I said, lots of weird things could happen when you're taking a photo. Are you familiar with the concept of pareidolia? The brain is hardwired to see recognizable patterns and things even when there isn't any pattern?
Yeah, that sounds like skeptic bullshit to me.
Skeptic bullshit.
That sounds more like a skeptic trying really hard to disprove.
It's a well-understood scientific phenomenon.
What you're saying is I looked at that picture looking for the shape of a girl, even though you can clearly see toes on the dress.
Did anybody tell you beforehand there was a picture of a little girl?
The only thing that was said to me was, look at this picture, what do you see?
You have already admitted yourself that you're open to the existence of ghosts. Already you're willing to interpret things in that way.
Okay.
Well, anyway, we're getting off topic.
Todos me dicen la negra Llorona, negra pero cariñosa. Todos me dicen la negra Llorona, negra pero cariñosa. Yo soy como el chile verde Llorona, picante pero sabroso. Yo soy como el chile verde Llorona, picante pero sabroso.
I lied. We are venturing outside of the United States with these last two legends. These are generally understood as straight-up urban legends, but they're fascinating to me. I love these two. One of our earlier episodes, I think episode 11, was our urban legend episode, and I've been wanting to do another one like that. So consider this a little miniature sequel to our urban legend episode from 2 or 3 years ago. But the first one is La Llorona, the crying woman of Mexico and the southwest United States. Widespread legend. Surely you've heard of this one. The woman who is said to, in a fit of revenge against an unfaithful husband, drowned her children. When she died, she was ushered to the gates of heaven and told that she could never enter until she found her children. Now the ghost of La Llorona wanders the southwest Mexico and Texas, saying, "Where are my children?" or "Oh, my children." In some variations of the legend, she will even abduct children, thinking that they are hers. Obviously, this is a standard variation on the cautionary legend that parents would tell their kids, basically just to make sure that they don't get into any shenanigans. One that's fascinating to me, and I'll tell you why it's fascinating. On the opposite side of the world, in Japan, there is a legend called Kuchisake-Onna, which is Japanese for the slit-mouthed woman. Completely separate myth that was developed in a totally different society with no interaction with each other that is startlingly similar.
I was going to say, it's like the same basis.
The legend of the slit-mouthed woman is that face was mutilated by violent husband. Obviously, her mouth was cut open. This woman walks around with a face mask on and will go up to children and say, "Am I pretty?" If they say yes, she will take off her mask and reveal her mutilated face and say, "Am I pretty now?" And if the child screams or doesn't react, their faces will be slashed, usually with a pair of scissors. What's interesting about this legend, there are are alleged sightings of Kuchisake-Onna. Something of a mass hysteria and panic in Japan in the 70s. Children were being escorted home from school. People were so afraid of this. One researcher thinks he found the basis of the legend. In the 70s, apparently there was a story of a woman who was chasing a child across the street, hit by a car, and when the body was looked at, her face had been slashed in a similar manner. Who knows? Obviously, you're familiar with the story of Lilith. Very ancient legend in Hebrew Apocrypha, the biblical Adam's first wife, who was made, unlike Eve, who was made from his rib, Lilith was made from the dirt as his equal, and she refused to lay beneath him during intercourse, so God kicked her out of the Garden of Eden, and she became a monster that ate babies. I'm going to write a book about this one of these days, of what I call the Lilith archetype. In a lot of ancient cultures, there's a similar character. Ancient Greece, there's the Lamia, who is a snake woman, who does a similar thing, who will seduce men and eat babies.
Okay, dude.
I just think it's fascinating. That's a very, very old legend. Lilith and Lamia, these are legends that are thousands of years old. And here in the modern world, there are still variations of it in totally separate cultures. And that, to me, is the power of myth.
Kuchisake-Onna. Kuchisake-Onna is very much real, just like the dragons are real, because dragons have been represented in every single culture around the world.
Dragons and werewolves are both kind of a part of every culture. I know you're being facetious, but you are right, JD, that dragons are this cultural archetype.
Being mildly facetious.
I'm not saying those things are real, but it is interesting to me how the same legends can develop in totally different cultures with little to no interaction.
Before I say this, I'm not saying one way or the other. What I believe, that in many different cultures over the world, there are depictions of what looks like a man in a spacesuit.
Well, the ancient aliens theory is a topic for another day.
Well, I'm not trying to say which way I believe on that. I was just bringing that up. That whether or not it does mean aliens visited back in the day.
It doesn't.
It's still fascinating that those depictions exist.
Something else that exists in all ancient cultures is the idea of the giant. Brings an end to our list of topics to talk about. I think this was an interesting episode, don't you?
I agree.
Our listeners, if we have requests for you, if you have any favorite legends or hauntings, or even any personal experiences, please send them to us. Email us at bangersinmash88@yahoo.com. Word bangers is the letter M, that's the word match, it's the number 88@yahoo.com. If you just want to leave a comment or something on the Facebook group, please feel free to. Call the Warrens, I'm possessed. facebook.com/The Bangers and Mash Show. We got a new like, but Facebook won't tell me who it is. If you're a listening person who liked us, thank you. Do you have any closing comments, JD? Other than that,
I release you, demon! Back to the pits of hell!
Your mother sucks cocks in hell!
How'd you know? I think that's a great way to end
That is a great way to end this.
So sorry, skeletons, you're so misunderstood. You only want to socialize, but I don't think we should. But spooky, scary skeletons shout startling, shrilly screams. They'll sneak from their sarcophagus and just won't leave you be. Supernatural or shy, what's all the fuss? The bags of bones seem so unsafe, it's semi-serious. Spooky, scary skeletons are city